Hey guys, this is Yoru again. I wanted to come back in and do a video about color matching. And again, this is a video that deals with green screen, so you're going to have your person cut out and you're going to have a background. I'm not going to go through the green screen, we already went through that, but this is kind of the aftermath of that, and it's usually the next step that I do when I am moving on from cutting out the green screen. And the reason I call it color matching is because you can put a lot of different backgrounds in behind the character you see right now, and she's not always going to match what you put in. So I have three examples of a background here I'm going to show you. This is the first one. It's kind of light. She actually looks pretty good on this background. The second one is pretty dark. She looks very bright for this background. And then the third here is a very colorful kind of neon background, and she doesn't look like she belongs here. So what I want to show you guys in this video is how to make a character look similar to their scene, to use colors from the scene to match the brightness and contrast of the scene, so that they look like they belong in whatever background you're about to put them in. And it's a hard thing to do if, one, you don't know what your background is going to be before you start your picture on Black Dragon or Firestorm or however you take your picture. And then it's also very difficult if, let's say, halfway through you decide this is not what I was thinking for the background, I'm going to trade it up, and you are stuck kind of with a very lightly colored character or very dark. If you took your character with a lot of shadows on them, it can sometimes really conflict with what your background is. So this is a video to teach you how to pretty much match whatever background or most backgrounds that you're trying to match. When I talk about backgrounds, just a friendly note, try to own your background, or at least be using a background that is free of charge. Don't steal backgrounds, don't steal wallpapers and then use them. Someone created that, you can get into copyright issues. Try to find a background that is free. There are sites for that. If you need them, please contact me. I have quite a few sites where you can find backgrounds, or you can get a subscription. I have a subscription to Adobe Stock Photos. That's where I get some of them, and then the other ones I actually create in Midjourney for backgrounds. I found that really handy lately. If you don't know what Midjourney is, it's an AI service. But again, you own these pictures, or I own these pictures when I create them, and so I'm able to use them without having any issue of copyright. And that is something to be cautious of, especially if you are a blogger. You don't want to get in trouble for a background that you're using. So moving on from there, please own your backgrounds. But we're going to go into color matching, and I'm going to start with our first background here. This is just an Adobe stock background that I'm using. And you can see I already have a hue and saturation layer here. I already have our character cut out. If you watched the green screen video, you will know how to cut out your character, where you get this layer here. And then you will also know how to match your hair from having these little green strands around it. And so you keep all of your strands with the hue and saturation layer. So that's what those two layers are. They're not going to pertain to this video, and I'm not going to merge them down because I like to keep all of my layers separately, so I can always go back and change them as I move through my entire creation of the picture on Photoshop. So to start, there are two steps to matching that you should remember. The first is you need to match the brightness and contrast of the picture, so how dark or light it is in comparison to the background. Better seen on this second one here. She is very bright in comparison to her background, so you would need to go in and make her darker for this. For this first one here, she is pretty light, so she kind of matches it, but I'm gonna show you the steps. So that first one is the brightness and contrast, and the second one that you have to do is color match. I will show you how to do both. We always start with brightness and contrast, and the best way to do matching kind of a brightness and contrast is to get rid of all of the color that you see right now, because you're going to be distracted by the color. So if, for instance, I had this background up, it's really hard to not be distracted by the neon colors. And so in order to get rid of the color on anything, you very simply are going to create a solid color gray layer, and you're going to set it to a color overlay. I will show you how to do that here. I'm going to zoom in here on the right where our layers are and come down to this half moon, and I am going to create a solid color. It's at the top. It's going to pull up, whoops, it's going to pull up this color picker, and I am going to create just a gray layer somewhere in the middle, all the way on the left is what I like to do. It doesn't really matter which gray you select, try to stay in the middle. And then I am going to set this to, by pulling down this overlay menu, I'm going to set it to a color here at the second to last. And you can see what it does to our picture. It gets rid of any color that was in the picture for both the front and the back. So I'm sorry, the character and the background. And that does that to all of the pictures because it's on the top layer here. So, and what it does is it gets rid of all of the colors so you are not distracted by how off the colors might be right now from the background to the person. You just want to focus on the brightness of the person and the contrast, which means the darkness in the shadow areas. So those are the two things that you're focusing on in this first one. First step is to fill with a color and get rid of all colors so that you can do this next step. The next step is to create a curves layer. And so I'm going to cam right in to the bottom here and show you how to do that. You hit this half moon again, which is my favorite thing, and you're going to come up to curves and add in a curve layer. It appears here, and what you're going to do is link it to the layer below it. So you guys have seen me do this if you watched the green screen green screen video. You're going to hit this button here that is in the top right corner. Zoom in so you can see it. Oh, you can't see it. Hold on. There you go. Okay, so it is in the top right corner up here, and it is going to link the layer that you just created, the curve layer, to the layer underneath it only. I will go back to full screen. So all it did over here was link this layer, this curve layer, to the layer below it, which is our person. So whatever we do now is going to affect our person and not our background, because again, we are trying to match the person here with our background layer. So in order to do this, you create this curve layer, and we're going to just try to get, by pulling in the middle here, trying to get our grays of our person in our character to match kind of the grays in the background. So it's very subjective, and it takes a little while to learn what you like best, and it takes a lot of finagling, but you're just going to try to get the color of the person, because right now I think she's a little bit dark for her background, and so I'm actually going to go and click once in the middle, and I'm just going to pull it up just a little bit, and you can see her changing until I think that she looks about what she would if this picture was black and white and she actually existed in this picture, right? We didn't just drop her in, but she was a part of this picture to start, how she would look black and white. The next step that we do, and we're going to come back to this curve layer, is to create another layer down here on the bottom right, and we are going to create a Oh, sorry guys, I got interrupted. Excuse me. We are going to create an exposure layer. Again, we are going to link it to the layer below, which is done in the top right here by this button. It links to the layer, so it's only messing with our character. And there you go, we have an exposure layer. The only thing that we are going to change on the exposure is our top bar here that says exposure, and then the gamma correction. We're not going to change the offset bar in the middle. So what exposure does, back up here, what exposure does is this top bar here is going to raise the whites of our person and make the highlights very, very bright, as you can see me doing right now. If I were to drag it down, it would do the opposite. And then the gamma is going to make the darks of our person, so watch her top, get very dark. So this is what these two do. And this is, again, something that you have to get used to as you match and you get better at it and you get more used to it. But what I like to do is usually pull up the exposure, make the brights kind of as bright as the whites. So like the part of her shoulder that is highlighted, or possibly like her nose right here, I like to pull up the whites until I can kind of see the way that they look and that they are the same as the very, very brightest color on her. It takes a lot of finagling and it is very subjective, so you just mess with these two bars until you feel like, again, she looks like she's supposed to be in this background. What might happen is after you start messing with exposure and gamma and playing with it, you might need to go back to your curves layer. So you click down on your curves layer, and you might need to mess with this a little bit as well, because maybe you made her a little too bright and now you need to bring that down so that she looks like she exists more in the picture and that she should be standing in this black and white room. So this is as close as I'm going to get right now. I could play with this forever until I feel like it matches, but you just play with it until you feel like she matches the background as best as possible. I always leave these layers just like this, and just like I did with the hue and saturation layer when we did the hair, so that I can always go back and change them. So I'm going to show you what it looks like without the black and white on top by hiding, you guys can't see what I'm doing here, by hiding this layer here of the color fill and going back here. So I'm going to hide the curves layer so that you can see how it changed and that she definitely got brighter with that. And then I'm going to hide the exposure layer and you can see how she looks a little more defined, and the contrast is a little bit darker on her clothes, which matches this darkness that's over here in our photo. So again, this is very, very subjective. It is something that you're going to play around with a lot, but this is how you start to match brightness and contrast with your photo. And the next step that we'll do as well is to color match. So we unhid our grayscale here. And now we're not going to use the color fill anymore. We're going to create another layer. This is the final layer of this step, and it is to create a gradient map here. The gradient map makes your character look very scary, but it's just picking up the colors that you have over here, which right now are black and white for me, and it's making a gradient map of them. So it's making, if you don't know what a gradient is, it is a color scheme that moves from a few different colors. It can move from just 1 to 2 colors like it is right now. It's moving from white to black, but in some cases you can add more and more colors to it, and it can be a whole rainbow kaleidoscope of layers and colors. For now, we're going to keep it white and black, and I will show you what you're going to do with this. But first and foremost, we only, once again, want to mess with our character. We don't want to make the background any other color. We want to keep the background as it is. And so we're going to hit this little button up here on the top right to link it to just our character. You will see that the background goes back to normal. And now it's just our character that looks terrifying right now. So first step first, I'm going to pull this gradient down. You can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to pull this gradient down the opacity to about 50% as we work on it. And again, she does not look any less terrifying, but it will work in the end, I promise. One thing that you want to make sure that you do when you are playing with a gradient map is that you are clicked on the left side of your two layers here. So we don't want to be on the layer mask. If we're over here, we cannot sample colors from our background when we get into it. We want to be on the left side here and select it on our adjustment layer itself so that we're able to select like the blues and the greens of this background when we get to it. So just make sure you are always on the left side when you are doing a gradient map, because that's where you're going to want to actually play with the gradient map. Okay, so with the gradient map, you're going to come up here to the right at the top and click it. It's going to pull open this other box, and I'm actually going to zoom in here so you guys can see what is in this box here. We are going to play with just this bar down here. And what this bar is the gradient map. Right now it is going from white, it is going to black. The way that you match gradient layers, I'm going to back up so you can see, the way that you match gradient layers is to put your lightest color of your background over on the right and your darkest color of your background on the left. So right now it's opposite, we're going to switch it up. So on the right here, I'm going to click on this little box here. I'll zoom back in so you can see. Whoops. I'm going to click on this little box here. It's going to select this point, and then I'm going to open the color picker. I'll back up. It opens another box here, which is the color picker, and this is where I was saying that you need to be able to sample your colors. The lightest color I can see in this background from what I'm looking at right now is this white here. So I'm going to sample this white. You'll see that it selected it here. Then I'm going to press OK. Now I'm going to go and try to find the darkest color, which I think is actually up here in the top right. I'm going to click on the left little box here because I just did the one on the right. And I'm going to click on the left. It's going to open the color picker once I click color down here. And I am going to select the darkest color from our background by sampling a few different areas. You can see my color picker moving around to try and find the darkest point of this picture. The way that you can know that if you have the darkest point is to watch your circle in the color picker. You want to be way down here in the dark colors. And so if I select something like this, it's going to come to like the middle. So I just keep clicking around and sampling from my background until I feel like I have the color that was the lowest, which I think it looked like it was probably down here. Yeah. So this is the lowest one in the background. It's the darkest color from our background. So we're going to press OK. And then next, the last step that we have here is to create another box, and this is called a midtones layer. Our midtones layer, we're going to put it at about 3/4 of the way down, so 75% across this bar. So I'm going to just click in the area where I want the box to be. It doesn't need to be exact. I managed to get 76% as the location. You can move it to whatever you want around the 70s for now. But this is going to be our midtone color. So once you have this spot, you are going to select the box that you just made, click on color, and it is going to pull open this color picker once more. And this is where it becomes, again, subjective. So right now you can see my background has a lot of different colors in it. And so it's not very easy to just pick a midtones color. And what a midtone color is a color that is in the middle range, right? We picked all the way light and we picked all the way dark. Now we have to pick a color that's somewhere in the middle, towards a little bit of the darker, but that is, again, a subjective thing. If you wanted to, you could pick something like this orange here. If you wanted her to kind of reflect a more orangey color, or you could pick something down here that is a little more green, blue, cyan. Whatever color you decide to choose is up to you. I personally, for this one, am going to start at least with this cyan blue color down here because I feel like if I look at this whole picture, it dominates a lot of the picture where the orange up here doesn't. So again, very subjective what you want your person to match in the background. It's what you feel like. But I think that kind of the cyany green color here matches a little bit more of what the character looks like in the background. So I'm gonna choose that for now. I can always come in and change this, and I probably will as I go through, but I just wanted to show you guys that the option is kind of yours on your picture, especially if you have a bunch of colors like this one does. So I'm going to press OK. I'm going to leave it at 73% right now, and I'm going to press OK. So this is what our character looks like right now. It's obviously a little bit too dark, but so I'm going to lower it to the opacity over here. I'll zoom in just so you can see the opacity here. I'm going to lower it to about 20 for the time being, and I'll back up so you can see what's going on. And get our character in here. So I'm going to hide and unhide what just happened so that you can see. So by adding the gradient map, she just gets this little tint of blue-green to her, but also the things that are really dark in this picture that it had black on, it starts to pick up the shadow tint of this darkest color that we picked. It wasn't exactly 100% black because there's not 100% black in our photo in the background. So we don't want there to be black on her because it just wouldn't make as much sense. So we want it to have this tint, and that's what we did by adding the gradient map. So again, I'm going to unhide and hide. So here it is without. Her skin has this red kind of pale peach glow to it. When I put the gradient map back on, it almost has this hint of blue to it that came from this green that we selected. And to me, that matches a little bit more with our background and makes a little bit more sense for the picture. Again, this is very subjective. If I wanted to come in here, and I'm going to go back so you guys can see and pull up the gradient map once more, that's all you have to do to pull it up, by the way, is to make sure you're clicked on the left side of the picture and hit your bar, your gradient map at the top right. It will pull the gradient editor back open. So let's say I didn't quite like this color well enough. I could come back here, click on it, and click my color picker. And then I could come in and start sampling different colors of what I thought might match better for the picture. So say I want her to have this kind of orange tint to her instead, and I feel like that matches better. Fine. That is what you think about the picture. It is 100% subjective and what you think matches your background. But for me, I kind of like this blue-green color to her a little bit more when it comes to matching, and it might be a little bit harsh, and so I can always come in here and lower the opacity more, or I could raise the opacity if I really wanted to make her a little bit more blue-green. And then I could come back, and I'll zoom in so you can see, I could come back and start messing with my exposure layers and my curve layer that I just did, so that I can change the colors and the brightness of her once more. So I'm back at the exposure layer now, and I think maybe she needs a little bit more brightness to her, so I could lift up the exposure at the top bar here. Or I could start lifting up the curves. Maybe I think she's too bright overall. I come back to my curve layer and I start playing with how dark she is and how much she matches. So that is what you do to color match your backgrounds. And this is just one example I'm going to do. I'll do the other two examples so you can see how it changes depending on the background. But those are the 3 steps, or really it's 2 steps, but it's 3 layers that I do in order to match my color background. It's not a perfect science. It is, again, very subjective. And so you just have to play with it until you figure out what you think looks best for you. So I'm going to do one here with the dark backgrounds instead. I'm going to go ahead and delete the 3 layers I just did so they don't confuse you guys. But you can see obviously that this would not be a good match for the background that I just put on here. It's obviously way too bright, and it has a color scheme that doesn't look good at all. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these 3 layers, which is our gradient layer, exposure, and curves. And I'm going to show you how to do it once more with a little bit of a different background so you guys get a different feel. I like dark backgrounds. It's just my personal preference. I like having dark backgrounds and having the person really pop out of the dark backgrounds. But if you like light backgrounds, you can use something like what we just did. So in order to start, again, what I would do is create this, and I've already done it, so let me delete it and do it again so you guys can watch, is to create this solid layer of getting rid of all of the color from our picture so that we do not get distracted by color while we try to match the brightness and contrast of our picture. So I'm going to come down here to the half moon. I'm going to create a solid color. It's going to open this color picker, and I'm going to pick a gray in the middle, and then I'm going to change the overlay to color so that you can see now our picture, all unhide and hide, is black and white, including the background right now, because we don't want to be distracted by any color. The next step that we do is create a layer, another layer, and it's going to be our curves layer. That's the first step. We are going to link it in the top right here to just our character because we only want to change our character's curves and not the rest of the background. And then we are going to start the subjective matter of trying to match the grays and the darkness of this picture with our person until it looks like she is standing in this picture if it was a black and white picture and we hadn't just put her into it. So I'm going to go with that for now, and knowing that I can come back here and I can mess with this curve layer at any point that I want. I'm going to unhide and hide it so you can see how much of a difference that it makes with that curve layer, and darkens her so that she looks a little bit more like she fits into the background. The second step of this is to create an exposure layer. So let me cam in here. Oops, wrong one. We're going to come down here to the half moon and we are going to add an exposure layer. We are going to then link it up here at the top right to just our character because we don't want to change the rest. And then we're going to play with both the exposure bar and the gamma correction bar until we feel like our character matches our black and white scheme here a little bit better. So I'm going to pull these over just a little bit so that she kind of pops, but I'm going to give her a little bit of a darker tint to her. And you can see, by the way, guys, that I'm not changing these a whole ton. It just depends on your picture, and I will go back to the curves layer sometimes and maybe lighten her up just a little bit so that I can go back to the exposure layer and really pull over the gamma. And maybe I want her to pop just a little bit more out. There we go. Okay, so now I feel like she looks like she's in this black and white photo. And I'm going to hide both of these layers so that you guys can see what it does and the difference that it makes. There you go. That curve one definitely makes a big difference so that she looks like she matches again in the black and white. Now I'm going to go and unhide the black and white layer so that you can see just how distracting the colors might have been when we were doing this. And we are going to go in and correct the colors of what she actually looks like so that she matches her background just a little bit more. In order to do that, we're going to come back down to the half moon. We are going to add a gradient map layer, and then we are going to come up here to the top right and link it to just our character. Excuse me. We're going to link it to just our character. There we go. All right. And the reason that the gradient map right now is showing all black is because for some reason it decided to pick up that the gradient map was going to be all black. So it thinks this is black and this is black. Sometimes it happens. Don't worry about it. We're going to go in here and change the colors anyways. So on the left here, make sure you are clicked. Oops, let me zoom in so you guys can see. Make sure you are clicked on the left box of the gradient map when you start this little venture. We're going to come up here to the gradient bar in our properties and click on it. It's going to pull open the gradient editor, and we are going to put our lightest color of our background on the right and our darkest color of our background on the left. Let me zoom back in. You guys can see. So I'm going to click on this box here and click on my color picker. It's going to open this box here, and I'm going to go in and click on the lightest color of our background, which I believe is this. And honestly, it's not very light. I'm going to lighten it just a hint with my own movement of the color picker. You guys can do this or you can choose not to. It's up to you. I like to have very light colors on the side here, so I'm going to just raise it, excuse me, just a little bit here into this kind of bluish color that came from us picking this color up here. And then on the left here, I'll zoom back in, we're going to click on this box here, and then our color picker. It's going to open our color picker up, and we are going to pick the darkest color in our background, which might actually be up in this corner. So let me move this over when I do this, just in case. And I'm going to start selecting some colors to see what is our darkest color in our background. That's pretty dark. It's way down here. But I'm going to select a few more areas and just see if any, oh, that's very dark, so we might do that one. Yep, it looks like the top right up here is the darkest color that we have. And so I'm going to press OK. And then I am going to go in here and click about 75%. I'll zoom back in so you can see. I'm going to click out about 75% below the bar and create another point. This is going to be our midtones color. And we're going to open our color picker again. And we're going to go and find a midtone of this picture. Now this is a pretty dark picture. And so the midtones is, again, very subjective. I actually think it's, for now, kind of this green color and this almost like tan it might be. So I'm going to select a few and see what happens. She's very dark right now because I haven't lowered the opacity of this layer at all. So I'm just going to select this green color for now and see what happens. Again, you can always open this back up, and you probably will a lot as you're getting used to doing this. Pressing OK on both of these, and then I'm going to go over here to our opacity, and I'm going to lower it quite a bit, probably to about, let's start with 30. Let me back up so you can see happen. So here's when it was very high. I'm just going to lower it, let's say about to, let's do 25 for now, or near that, 25%. So I'm going to hide and unhide what I did so that you can see that she kind of has this tint to her that is a little more green that we added in the midtones. And her darkest color of her matches the darkest color of the background, and the lightest color of her matches the lightest color, I'm sorry, the lightest highlight in our background. So she just has this little bit of green tint to her, instead of having that really, really almost red color that she has here, which you kind of see with this orange, so it doesn't look terrible, but it just doesn't match this side of the picture. She doesn't look like she makes sense with this side of the picture. And to me, I think she looks a little bit more like she fits into this picture when I add in this green tint and this gradient layer, but I do think she's a little dark now. So I'm going to come back to my exposure and my curve layers over here, and I'm just going to play with them a little bit to see if I can brighten her up and make it look like she's not quite so dark as she is. And so all I did is start to mess with the exposure bar at the top right, and then I might come back into the curves and raise it just a little bit so that she doesn't look so bright. I'm sorry, so she doesn't look so dark. And I think that actually looks pretty good with her background, and that she matches it a little bit more. Of course, from this point, I would always be doing highlights and shadows and rim lighting that goes around the person, so they start to change more colors, and this step here is just a color match. It's just to make sure that your character doesn't stand out really oddly from the background, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and link these together just so you guys can see what I'm doing here and how it changes. Oops, there we go. Sorry, I linked the wrong layers together, guys. I'm going to link all of these layers together so you can hide and unhide and see what happens here. There we go. So by hiding all of these layers, you can see she doesn't, this is the original, by the way, of what she looked like. She doesn't fit this background. And by adding in our curves exposure and our gradient map, she just looks like she fits this background a little bit more. Of course, we would always have to do more to this. We'd have to add highlights. We'd have to add some different shadowing. We might add some like pops of orange on the left side of her here. But that's all the next step that I'll show you guys. This is really, really just the base layer, but if you don't do this part, your character ends up looking like this when you start, and it just doesn't make sense with the background. She looks way too bright for the background. So you want to start with this base layer, and that's all this color matching process is. So I'm going to do it one more time so you guys have, you guys can really see. And this one's going to be with a little bit more brighter of a color background, so that you can see how much that it changes the actual person and what you can do with pops of color if you have actually pops of color in your neon backgrounds. So I'm going to go ahead once again and delete all of these layers so that we can start fresh and pretend like we just started. So again, we are going to create a solid layer here, and we're going to make it gray, and then we're going to turn the overlay to color. This gets rid of all of the color in our photo so that we can better match the background's brightness and contrast with our person's brightness and contrast. And to be honest, The picture right now, as I look at it, is pretty close. It doesn't look like it's too far off. She looks like from a black and white photo at least, not from this photo because there's color, but from a black and white perspective, she doesn't look like she is too out of whack with the background photo. I am still going to do the steps here though, so you can see how it changes even if it's subtly. So we are going to come down here to the half moon, and we're going to add a curves layer. We're going to link it with this button here to just our character because we only want to mess with our character. And then I think I'm going to actually brighten it up just a little bit and pull it up from the middle. And then I'm going to add a exposure layer. Down here at the half moon, going to exposure. Then I am going to link it again because we only want to mess with our character. And then I'm just going to mess with these bars at the top right and pull up the exposure a little bit, pull up the gamma correction because I think the darks in this photo, as you can see here in this background, it's pretty dark. So I want her top to be pretty dark. I want the darks to be pretty dark. There we go. So I'm going to hide and unhide what I did so you guys can see the difference. And so I think that just by the exposure layer in particular, it really does a good job of contrasting her. And there is a big contrast from the dark in the background with the light white here. You can look at the two colors when you have the mountain here. I'm sorry, the mountain, the tower here. You have a really, really dark black, and then you have this really, really light white. And so now it's very similar for her, right? Before I added the exposure, it was kind of like just similar in the gray colors, but adding exposure makes it stand out more and makes it match the background a little bit more when it comes to her brightness and her contrast. So I'm going to unhide the color fill layer. So we bring the colors back in, and then I'll show you again what it looks like by doing this. And then we are going to color match because very clearly she does not match the color of her background. It doesn't make much sense. She looks fine, but she looks like you plopped her there. She doesn't look like she fits this neon and blue and pink scene. So this is going to be a gradient map addition. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to go to the half moon and I'm going to make a gradient map. It's going to pull open this gradient map layer again. I am going to make sure that in the top right here, I link it to just my character because I don't want to change the background. And then I am going to pull open the gradient map by clicking this bar up here. And this pulls open our gradient map. On the right, we are going to have the lightest color of the background. On the left, we are going to have the darkest color of our background. So I am going to go into the left box, I'm sorry, the right box, and pull open the color picker, and I'm going to choose the lightest color in our background, which I think is probably this kind of yellow picker over here. Oh, you guys, oh, this is a perfect example of me not doing the right thing so that you can see how easy it is to not do the right thing. Right now, any color I pick on in the background is only giving me white, despite me clicking all over. Despite me clicking on the pink, it's only giving me white on the color picker because I didn't do the one step I told you guys to do, so you can see it in live action. And that is to come down here in our layers and make sure you are clicked on the left side. Otherwise, you cannot pick from colors in the background. So if you are just getting white over or black over and over again, it means that you probably haven't clicked on the left side of your layer. So there we go. I'm going to click on the left side of my layer. I am going to go back up here to the gradient map, and then I'm going to do this again by clicking on the right box, and I'm going to open the color picker, and then hopefully yes, there we go. So now when I pick a color, you will see that it actually picks and samples colors from our background instead of just getting white and black. So if that happens to you, just close out of the two things that you opened and go back into here and make sure you are selected the left of your layer. So going back to here, I think this is probably our brightest color in our background. It's kind of like a yellow tint to it, and it seems to be the brightest color in our background. So I'm going to go with that for now. And then for the darkest color, it's probably going to be this really dark sky black blue purplish color. I'm going to go to the left here of our box, open the color picker, and then I'm going to go in and sample just a few colors to see where is the darkest color of this picture. And it looks like it is actually up here in the top left, and it's kind of this like almost purpley black color. Pressing OK, and then we are going to do a midtones color. Now, with neons, it's even more subjective with neons. You kind of get to pick what you want your person to be reflecting as a base. So again, like I said at the last picture, this is just the base layer of what your character is. So if you got rid of all of these bright pinks and bright blues, what would the base color of this picture be, even if it is neon? Would it be pink? No, probably not. It looks like pink is kind of this reflecting color instead. It looks like this blue that you see at the base here is kind of a mid-tones color. Like if she was standing on the street and you got rid of all of the colors in the background and all of the pink neon on the side of her, what color would she be reflecting? It looks like it's going to be more of this blue, at least in my opinion it does. So I am going to pick this blue color for our midtones, and I do that by, again, clicking around the 75% up here, making sure I have that box selected, opening the color picker, and then I'm going to sample from this blue that's right under her arm here. And it actually creates a nice blue for her. She's obviously way too dark right now, but we're just picking the colors. You're going to press OK on both of these, and then I'm going to go in again. I'll zoom in and lower the opacity because it's pretty bright. So I'll start with, let's do 40, and I'll back up so you guys can see what I'm doing now. I'm actually going to lower it a little bit more to maybe 30. Maybe I'll go higher until I feel like it might be the right color. I actually think she's a little bit too light, and that even though she has like now this blue tint to her, that she looks too washed out, right? We haven't added any highlights or anything like that, but she looks too washed out to me. So maybe I'm going to open my gradient map and I'm going to go back in and I'm going to pick maybe a brighter color or a darker color. Let's start with this kind of purpley blue color instead. So that actually looks a little bit better to me. I think she's way too dark, but I think like she looks like she would be standing on this street. So I'm going to press OK. And again, you're going to do this a lot, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of subjectivity until you figure out what you want. I've done this a lot. I do it with every picture that I do in green screen, so sorry if I'm going fast, but you'll get used to it, and you guys can pause me as many times as you need. But I'm going to lower this just a little bit because I think she's a little too dark, but I kind of like this almost purple tint that it gave her. And then she still has this like kind of reflection of darker blue, sorry, not darker blue, lighter blue within her shirt and her shadow areas. And so I'm going to mess with this exposure until about here. And I think she kind of looks like she stands in this picture better. I'm going to unhide and hide this gradient map so you can tell. So here she does not look like she matches her background at all. Looks like she came straight out of SL. And here, when we put our gradient map back on, she kind of looks like she's standing in this street. Now, she looks too dark again, in my opinion. So I'm going to come back to this exposure layer, and I'm going to brighten her up just a little bit. And then maybe I'll come back to the curves, and I'll also do just a little bit brighter so that she stands out a little bit more. And I think the gradient map is a little extreme, so I'm going to lower that just a little bit and play with these colors until I am satisfied that she looks like she is standing on this street. And I might even go back into my gradients map and try to select another color to see if that helps, to see if that changes anything. I have to be selected on the 75% to do my midtones. And then maybe I'll just click around until I figure out what I think looks best. Those all look too bright. So I'm actually going to go with this dark blue. I think it looks the best. And another thing that you can do is pull your 75% either lighter if you want her to be brighter or darker if you want her to be a little bit darker in the color that you selected as midtones. But I think that actually looks pretty good right there. So now I think she matches her backgrounds a little bit more. She blends in. Of course, now I would go in, and in the next video, I promise I will show you this, but I would go in and I would start to make pink reflections off the side of her, or give this side of her face a little bit of a pink glow, or maybe this side of her shoulder I would give a blue glow. That is all things that I do in the next step when it comes to shadowing and highlighting and adding rim lighting. I promise I will talk about it in my next video, but this is really an important step if you're trying to match your background, and I would never do shadowing, highlighting, or rim lighting without doing this color matching step first, especially if I have a vastly different background like the one you're seeing right now, because again, I'll show you what it looks like if you don't do this. And this is what it originally looked like. This is after adding in our color matching layers and our brightness matching layers, and it just looks a little bit better and a little bit more like she exists in this scene. Again, it's very subjective. You are going to have to play with these a lot in order to get used to them. And even then, you guys might be like, man, that doesn't look like it matches at all. Someone's always going to think it doesn't match, but you are going to be much closer in your colors than before if you're just putting a person on a background without color matching them or without brightness and contrasting them. So that is my spiel. This is a much longer video than I was expecting it to be, but that's because I did 3 examples. So I hope this helps you guys when it comes to color matching, and I promise that the next video will be a fun shadow and highlighting video because to me that is the most fun that you can have when it comes to Photoshop and changing up the look of your character and adding a lot of elements that you can't exactly do in Second Life or Black Dragon or Firestorm itself. So thank you guys. I hope you have a good day.